My wife and daughter left me when I got very sick. Years later, they came back to take over my house. But let me tell you what happened from the start. First, I found out I had a serious illness called advanced Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was a shock because I've always been healthy. I ate well, stayed active, and went to the doctor regularly. The doctor said they didn't know exactly why I got sick, but there was a small chance I could survive with tough treatment. When I told my wife, Daisy, and our daughter, Luna, they were really upset. I promised them I would fight the illness with everything I had, but I worried about how it would change our family. The doctor said the treatment would be hard, and some marriages don't make it through. That night, I talked to my wife about my worries. She promised she would stay with me and help me through everything. Luckily, we were in a good financial situation. We had good insurance, savings, and money from my late grandfather. Our house was paid off, and I had money saved for Luna's college. I started chemotherapy a week later. It was really tough. When I came home, I felt exhausted. I could barely do anything, not even take care of myself. But my wife and daughter took care of me. They cooked, cleaned, drove me to the hospital, and made sure I had my medicine. I tried not to ask too much of them because I didn't want to be a burden. This went on for 2 hard months. However, things started to get tense with my wife and daughter. They seemed reluctant to help me, and my daughter stopped responding when I asked for simple things like water or some fresh air. One day, I had an early appointment for treatment, and my wife hadn't come downstairs. When I asked her about it, she just told me to take an Uber because she was tired. It was surprising and upsetting, but I didn't know what else to do, so I called for an Uber and asked the hospital for help. Luckily, the Uber driver was really kind and made sure I got to the hospital safely. When I got back home, things hadn't gotten any better. So I finally gathered the courage to talk to my wife and daughter about their behavior. They admitted they were feeling overwhelmed, and my daughter said she didn't expect me to need so much help. I suggested hiring a nurse to assist me with daily tasks and take me to my appointments. They agreed, and we found a nurse who was really helpful. But even with the nurse, my wife and daughter still seemed unhappy. My wife felt like the nurse was taking her place. I offered to let my wife take over the nurse's responsibilities if she was willing to do everything the nurse did. She agreed, but wasn't happy about it. She even suggested getting a male nurse, but there weren't any available. I tried to explain that the nurse was chosen because she had experience with patients like me. Despite my efforts to help, my wife was still upset. She thought I should be doing more for myself instead of relying on everyone else. I tried to explain that there were days when I could barely move because of the treatment, but she didn't seem to understand. Later, my mother-in-law called and complained about having another woman in her daughter's house. But technically, the house was mine before we got married. But I chose to handle the situation calmly. I explained to my mother-in-law that I needed more help than her daughter could give me, so I had to bring in a nurse to ease the burden on my family. I assured her that the nurse would only be there temporarily for the rest of my chemotherapy treatments, unless my condition got worse. She wasn't completely convinced, but she eventually left me alone. For about a week after that, things seemed normal. My treatment was going well. Then, one day after coming back from chemotherapy, I saw a moving truck outside my house. My wife and daughter had packed up and said they were going to stay with their mother. I was hurt and upset, but I was too tired to express how I felt properly. It felt especially cruel that they left right after my chemo sessions when I was at my weakest. I asked my daughter if this was what she really wanted. She said she'd rather live with her mother because it was too hard to live with me. It was heartbreaking to watch them leave, tears filling my eyes. It was exactly what I had feared when my chemo started, feeling unwanted and abandoned. In the midst of my sadness, my brother stepped in. He noticed the nurse spending extra time with me and asked if I had any family nearby who could help. My brother lived 3 hours away and had his own kids, but he offered to help. But he generously offered to take time off work to stay with me until I found a more permanent solution. When he arrived, he was angry about what my wife had done, calling her selfish and ungrateful. He pointed out that she never had to work since we got married, and had always made sure she had everything she needed. My brother could only stay for a week, but he had another idea. His wife's sister, Kara, was going through a tough divorce and needed a safe place to stay temporarily. Her soon-to-be ex-husband was the main breadwinner, leaving her with limited money. Kara was also studying nearby on a scholarship. My house was close to her university, making it a good option. I wouldn't be alone, and she would have a safe place away from her difficult situation. I agreed to let Kara stay without paying rent since she'd be helping me out. She could choose any bedroom she wanted. My wife and daughter had taken most of the stuff, leaving just the bed and a few clothes. My brother helped Kara move in, and she promised to be helpful and considerate. I told her she wouldn't need to do too much since my nurse would be coming more often now. In the following weeks, things went smoothly. I missed my wife and daughter, but they didn't even bother to check up on me. Kara was a huge help, taking care of groceries, cleaning, and cooking without complaining. About a month and a half after my wife left, I got the news that I was cancer-free. It was a big moment, celebrated at the hospital by ringing a bell. My nurse asked what I wanted to do next, now that I was cured. I decided to file for divorce, freeing myself from a marriage that hadn't supported me during my illness. With the divorce process started, I focused on recovering from cancer. It was a slow journey, but I started to feel stronger. My hair grew back, my scar healed, and I gained weight. I stuck to a healthy diet mostly but treated myself occasionally to the foods I missed. It's been 6 months since I was declared cancer-free, and I'm ready to move on. My old job is willing to rehire me for remote work, so I'm thinking of taking that and moving away. While I'm attached to my house, it holds too many painful memories. I want a fresh start, and I plan to give the house to Kara. She's been there for me when I needed it most. When I was at my lowest, Kara showed immense kindness, even though we were practically strangers. She's free to sell the house if she wants. I don't want anything to do with it, especially if it means my wife or daughter could claim it. My new place is in a quiet countryside neighborhood, and I'm eagerly looking forward to this new beginning. Update number 1. Hey wife and daughter. It's been over a year since my diagnosis, and I've settled into my new place nicely. I've made friends with my neighbors, including Sophia, who lives across the way. She's a widow who invited me over for drinks and shared her story of losing her husband to cancer. She emphasized the importance of life insurance. I'd opened up about what happened with my wife and daughter, but surprisingly, I still haven't heard from them. I've been pursuing new hobbies, like woodworking, and I'm starting to build up a collection of tools. One day, Sophia noticed some people hanging around my house who matched the description of my wife and daughter. It left me wondering why they were looking for me. Sophia assured me she'd handle it if they returned, and I had no desire to interact with them after they abandoned me. Later, I found out they had been harassing Kara and her roommate at my old house. Fortunately, Kara had proof that the house was hers now, and she explained she had bought it for me. I felt bad and apologized to Kara. Hopefully, I can resolve the situation for good if they come back. As for my wife, I'm not sure if she's aware of the divorce papers. I've reached a point where I don't care anymore. Update number 2. My wife and daughter showed up at the house again. Once again, my wife and daughter showed up at the house, but this time it was earlier in the day while I was working. I heard the knock and decided to check the security cameras, and indeed, it was them. My ex-wife looked just as I remembered, but Luna had grown significantly. She was practically a young woman now. I followed the plan Sophia and I had discussed, staying inside but moving closer to the door to hear them better. Sophia, being the good neighbor she is, came over to greet them and introduced herself. My wife asked if she knew a man named Charlie who used to live there. Sophia sounded just as baffled as I was and questioned her use of used to. My wife explained that her husband, not ex-husband, had lived in this house before his recent untimely death following an extended hospital stay. My jaw dropped at this revelation because, to my knowledge, there was no record of my death anywhere, especially not at the hospital where I underwent treatment. My wife went on to claim that they were the next of kin, implying that the home was rightfully theirs. Sophia informed them that someone named Charlie did live there for a while but clarified that he was a divorcee. She also shared that during our time as neighbors, I had informed her that my wife had left me, and I had filed for a unilateral divorce. Sophia added that as far as she knew, I intended to bequeath all my assets to charity since I had no other family besides my brother. This was why she found it strange to see two women snooping around my house. The conversation fell into an uncomfortable silence before Sophia inquired if they had a death certificate or a will. They replied in the negative. Sophia explained that once they had those documents, they could take them to the county's record office. If they were indeed the rightful owners of the property, they could then get the deed in their name. My wife did not take kindly to this suggestion. She asked Sophia who she thought she was and started screaming, asserting that Sophia had no authority to interfere in her affairs. She also accused Sophia of being nosy and demanded that she mind her own business. I felt a deep sense of embarrassment. The people in this neighborhood had been nothing but kind to me, and here my ex-wife was making a scene and disturbing their peace. Part of me wanted to go out there and give her a piece of my mind. Despite the chaos, I chose to stick with our plan. Sophia, bless her heart, apologized to them and explained that she was merely trying to be helpful. After they left, I went over to Sophia's place to apologize. She brushed it off, mentioning that while she found my wife's behavior repulsive, she also found the outbursts somewhat amusing. My wife came back again yesterday. I was working in my home office when I heard a loud crash. Rushing out to the living room, I found my front window smashed, and my neighbors were outside trying to stop her. Apparently, she had been causing a ruckus for a while, but I hadn't heard it because I had noise-canceling headphones on. Both my ex-wife and daughter were holding bats, and they had already broken a few of my plants. I asked her if she had lost her marbles and told her to get off my property before I called the cops. Unbeknownst to me, my neighbors had already placed the call. She seemed hurt by my words and asked why I hadn't contacted her after I got better. She insisted that she and Luna would have come back. I told her that we made vows to stand by each other in sickness and health, and she broke those vows. I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. She asked about Luna and mentioned that she's going to college next year and can't afford tuition on her own. I replied that her daughter was fine with abandoning me too, and I'm ready to give up all my parental rights. I don't want anything to do with either of them. After hearing that, she swung at me with a bat just as the cops showed up. They immediately arrested both her and my daughter. They asked if I wanted to press charges, and of course I did. After work, I ordered a new window and cleaned up the glass. Sophia gave me some buckets to put my plants in until I can replace the pots. Curious about what brought my ex-wife back, I did some digging. It turns out her mom passed away 2 months ago, and they found out the house they had been staying in didn't belong to her or her husband. With both of my ex-wife's parents now gone, she and our daughter sold most of their belongings and have been living in a motel. When they came back to our old home and saw Kara there, they assumed I had died and went snooping around for recordings of my assets and purchases, which is how they found me. Regardless, they're facing charges of vandalism, attempted break-in, and attempted assault. Since Luna is a minor, she's receiving community service, but my ex-wife is facing time behind bars as this was clearly premeditated. I'm considering obtaining a restraining order as well. At least for now, I won't have to worry about her for a good long while.